Hi, everybody, and welcome to this episode of TGF TV. I'm delighted to be here today with Miranda Macpherson. Welcome, Miranda.
Thank you so much, Susan.
So this show is broadcasting live on Facebook and is also an open webinar. So we welcome both our Evolve members and our guests to this show. Miranda is going to be our presenter in the presenter series for May. And if you don't know Miranda, some of you will have seen her at the conference this past weekend. But if you're not familiar with Miranda, she is an interfaith minister and spiritual teacher who brings a feminine approach to surrender and non-dual realization based on a practice she calls ego relaxation. Miranda has written extensively about this in her book, The Way of Grace. Miranda's background is in A Course in Miracles, the Diamond approach, and she is possibly most influenced by Ramana Maharshi. And in her 20s, Miranda founded the One Spirit Interfaith Foundation in London, where she trained and ordained over 600 ministers and counsellors. And today she's the leader of the Living Grace Sangha in Northern California. She leads retreats internationally and more recently online. She serves as core faculty for the Shift Network and is an advisor for the Association for Spiritual Integrity. So it's lovely to have you, Miranda. We did a show together back in July 2020, and I was really looking forward to talking to you again and welcoming you to the presenter series, which begins on the 3rd of May. So you are going to open the show for us with a chant.
Oh,
So if you would...
yes, of course. Good morning, everyone, or wherever you are in the world, whatever time it is. It's very early in the morning with me, and I always like to start my day with prayer. And so I'm inviting you just to join me in dropping in for a moment before we start a conversation together about rising into spiritual maturity. So what most helps us is to come into our deeper center. And so right now I invite you just to close your eyes and take some deeper breaths. And just receive the sound of the one note. And that one note be like a magnet that effortlessly draws you deep into your own heart. And deeper still, as if at the back of your heart is the heart of being. Where all conflicts are resolved and dissolved. Where peace and stillness reigns forever. So Ramana Maharshi said that the essential universal truth is I am that. And that the way to know I am is to be still. Let the chant be still and know that I am God. Find you and help you abide in that within which is never rocked.
Thank you, Miranda. So one, I remember from the last time we spoke that you had a very life-changing experience in Ramana Maharshi's cave. Can you tell us about that, please?
Sure. I was 36 at the time, and I had been, at that point in my life, spiritual director of the One Spirit Interfaith Foundation in London, and I wasn't looking for anything new, but if I'm really honest in retrospect, I had been feeling a little stale in the 2 years prior to that, as if I kind of intuited that there was a whole other possibility knocking on the inner door, and it was, was bubbling up in my morning meditations, but I didn't quite understand what it was or what it was asking of me. And so I went on pilgrimage. I wasn't expecting anything, particular. I didn't have a special connection to Ramana at the time. And I was just happy to be in India and to, have some time for my own spiritual practice. And so I was meditating in the cave, one of the caves that was where he lived before people really got to know about him all those years ago. And I just sat on a dusty old cushion in a very hot cave in India, and I started to feel the presence of silence that I was already familiar with and loved. And it felt like it absorbed me, erased me, would be the best description. So it felt that I, in the way I had known myself, disappeared, world disappeared, everything disappeared, and as if there was nothing but this thunderous silence, and I heard the transmission: be nothing, do nothing, get nothing, become nothing, seek for nothing, relinquish nothing, be as you are, rest in God. And so it was as if all of the plugs had been pulled out of the soundboard of my self-construct, my concepts about God, my concepts about the world. I was in this state of nothing and no one, total quiet, for about 3 weeks continuously. And then after that 3-week period, when I was back in England, the familiar mind awareness of who I was and so forth came back, but there was this depth that also was there. And so as that happened, I heard same presence that revealed this transmission saying, now integrate it. And I knew enough at that point in my path to know that it's not about the state, that all states, even the very deepest states, come and go. What's really important isn't holding on to a particular state. The important thing is to let these states educate us as to how reality really is, and to let the wisdom of these inner experiences become actualized. And so that started to initiate a deep process of, I think what A Course in Miracles really calls a period of undoing, which is often what happens when there has been a deep awakening that changes our core center of gravity. It challenges all of our attachments and familiar reference points. And so there was this process of everything that made up my familiar identity and constructs, all the supports for that just started coming tumbling down, which was pretty huge. And I understood that that was necessary. Didn't necessarily mean it was easy. It was not. So this period of undoing, was pretty total and went on for a couple of years. And then after that, there was a period of reintegration that also went on for another couple of years. And from that, a whole body of a transmission, the transmission that came through started to reveal more of what it actually meant. So a body of teachings and practice started birthing itself out of all of this. And that was this body of teachings I share in The Way of Grace, and not only the transmission of ego relaxation, which is be nothing, do nothing, which is like a stopping in instantaneously if you let the transmission in, but it's also an ongoing practice for opening exponentially into deeper dimensions of grace and who and what we truly are, and learning to live that in and amidst daily life. I could say more, but it's probably enough for now.
Yeah, and that leads very nicely into the topic that you have chosen to teach in your series of 4 live masterclasses in the presenter series in May, which is called Rising into Spiritual Maturity, Evolving from Me to We Consciousness. So why that particular topic? Why is coming into spiritual maturity so important now?
Well, I think we only have to turn on the news to see the answer to that question. To me, it's pretty obvious that when we look at what's going on, not everywhere we live in the world, there's immense reactivity going on at the moment, and intense conditions tend to provoke that. And we are in a time that none of us have ever lived through before. In a way, it's pretty profound as an invitation to evolve. We're being asked, all of us, to work with whatever's being pressed on, so that instead of reacting from fear, contracting from our sort of survival instinct into, more devolved ways of being, polarization, whether the polarization and the reactivity is triggered by, a position on the vaccine or masks or not wearing masks, or, you know, it's like, it's kind of extraordinary to see, to me, look, surely this is an invitation to see that the invitation on the table amidst all of this is to move beyond a consciousness that is always just thinking about oneself and one's own, and instead really live into what all non-dual teachings have been asking us to open to, which is the fact that we are not separate from one another, and that every single thing we think and say and do affects everybody. And I just think this is so powerful as a spiritual invitation to become really conscious, not just in our, meditation cushion, but every time we walk out the door. It's like, what is my impact? How is the choices and the way I'm moving through the world affecting everything and everybody else? Is it having a beautiful, caring impact? Are my choices and moment to moment actions an embodiment of unity and love and truth? Or are they just unconscious self-centeredness? And to me, the problem really is that there's just too many little egos running around, being unconscious and not even aware that they're being unconscious, and many of them doing so in the name of spirituality. And so I'm a teacher who's very rubber meets road, and I'm interested in kind of really getting to the nitty-gritty of what's going on. I've never been satisfied in just giving spiritual principles, because it doesn't work like that. We need to really unpack the source of why we get reactive, why we devolve, why we get positional, locked down in our defenses, where exactly we might be talking a good game but not living it. And so I just feel that this is the invitation of our times, to harness how we feel about this whole situation that we're in collectively, and turn that into the path in a real way.
Yeah, and I think
Just become more mature.
yes.
Right.
um,
Embody the virtues of our deepest nature, which is not a matter of just wanting to. We have to see, as the Course in Miracles says, we have to bring what's inhibiting or limiting that to the light of awareness and understand it, and let the grace of true nature touch it and dissolve it.
yeah. And I think it's fair to say, that a lot of people think that what's been happening is things going really wrong.
Mm-hmm.
So how, for somebody who feels like that,
Mm-hmm.
how then do they start to see this as an invitation?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think firstly, you know, we could take that position. Things are going wrong. These are very stressful conditions, and we're dealing with some very big challenges. How is our world, all of us, going to get beyond the pandemic? It's going to take cooperation. It's going to take, embodying our love and looking at our participation in the process, and challenging ourselves when we're just digging our heels into some position. So, yes, we could look at it as things are going wrong, but it's more helpful to look at it as a divine invitation. And A Course in Miracles says that really we're all working through very personalized versions of a universal curriculum. And I would say that the essence of that universal curriculum is wake up, and love, right? And that waking up means waking up out of obscuring habits of mind, conditioning, unconsciousness, hurts, difficult history that limit the natural goodness and love and kindness and empathy and compassion and humanity of our deepest nature, which is natural. And waking up into, just more maturity, refined states of being, gaining more access to truth and the wisdom of truth. And so that is a process, and we all need help with that process. I need help with that process. You need help. It's not something that we can do alone. We actually need to join together, because sometimes there are things we just can't see on the meditation cushion alone. And so a big part of why I teach and share and how I teach and share is we use the power of relationship to, follow lines of repeating questions that help us to see in the unconditional kind of being together, help us to really see our own mind and the more hidden layers that often are being enacted but that we're not conscious of, and to see them with and from love. And so as we do the work, and as Thomas Merton said, he said, you don't have to know what is really happening or where this is all going, but what you need to recognize are the possibilities and the challenges of the present moment, and to embrace them with courage, faith, and love. He said, the world is transparent and the divine is shining through the whole time. And that is true even with the coronavirus, even with people we don't agree with, even though there are so many unknowns still, and so much suffering and stress and difficulty that we're all having to do our best to greet and work with in our lives. But there are also opportunities too, and I think if we all explore what has happened for us personally in the last year, there perhaps have been, invitations to change, invitations to let go of something, or invitations to learn something, invitations to finally address something that maybe has been wanting to be addressed for many years, but we hadn't necessarily had the motivation or didn't quite know how. And so I think that's part of it. And so taking the attitude of whatever is so in your personal situation and whatever is so in our collective situation as an invitation, then it brings us back to the immediacy of the present moment, and taking that attitude of the happy learner who is willing to listen and to what is true, to what is needed, to what serves, and letting that be our priority.
Yeah. Some comments from Facebook. Someone said, yes, people need to understand what is happening with our thinking. A question, knowing this process takes time and willingness. Knowing this process takes time and willingness is helpful. Can you talk about an example of an experience of level confusion that is mixing up the physical world and the spiritual world of oneness?
Wow, that's a good question.
Mm.
I think there's a lot of level confusion when it comes to the pandemic and the vaccine. And, I sometimes encounter, people who are very devoted to non-dual teachings or Course in Miracles, where essential to the teachings of A Course in Miracles particularly is the teaching that I'm not a body, I am free. And so I think that sometimes, in relation to issues of our times where, we're being asked to take the vaccine, or we're being asked to get real about how we're going to move through this whole pandemic situation, we can delude ourselves very easily saying, I'm not a body, I'm free, therefore I don't need to take the vaccine. Or, we could be irresponsible with our mask wearing, not taking in the possibility that we might be a carrier and be asymptomatic ourselves, but not necessarily having a loving impact on another person. And we could just live in the concept, oh, it doesn't matter, I'm not a body. Well, that's a real bypass of, of the embodiment of love, which is, if I'm not a body, then I'm not separate from you. And if I'm not separate from you, one of the most important things about non-dual realization in terms of practicalities is that when it awakens in our heart, what it produces is a deep love and reverence for everything and everyone, because you get it, that everything and everyone is God. And so are you. And therefore, everything and everyone deserves to be treated with the utmost respect and kindness, period. And so I think it's more an issue not only of level confusion, but of deeper integration of these spiritual truths, because when they get more integrated, what it produces is a noble, beautiful, impeccable human. And it changes the way we are. It makes us really embody our love and our care. Deep experience of unity makes us noble and beautiful. It makes us care about, you know, doing our best with our recycling, not just being careless and thoughtless about it, but doing what we can do, you know.
Yeah. That's a really practical example of evolving from me to we consciousness.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's another question. When you're in a habitual trigger cycle with your partner, how in the moment can I shift it more often?
Yeah. Well, I think everybody understands the that question. So I think part of what I'm going to be teaching, and where I always start in any kind of teaching series, is to learn how to ground ourselves more substantially in that which is never rocked and doesn't change. And of course, when we get triggered, what's happening is we're becoming ungrounded from our deeper realization and the fact of the love and the support. And when that happens in deep relationship, it's because inevitably we're wired as human beings in our early life to get attached to another person, and we want them to be a certain way to support ourselves so we can feel at ease and at peace. And that's not wrong. It's a very core part of being human. But of course, inevitably, when they do something we don't like or that we find difficult or painful or upsetting, you know, we can't help but react sometimes. So we all need to learn how to ground ourselves in those moments when our defenses get triggered. And what I often find is really helpful is to immediately come out of the mind into our immediate direct experience. And the quickest way is to just come down into your body. Now, a lot of Course in Miracles people go, hang on a minute, I'm not a body. Why is that useful? Well, it's when you come down into, for example, you notice your partner does something and you feel that kind of anger and you want to say something mean to them. If you instead bring your focus down to the actual sensation of your feet on the ground, you kind of just butterfly your knees if you're sitting down, or just bring your consciousness down into your legs, and you really just sense, okay, here now this, here now this. I don't have to try to get them to support me. The ground is supporting me. It doesn't have an opinion about me. It doesn't need me to be any particular way. The ground of this earth is just loving and sustaining and supporting. The trees are compassionately sucking in my carbon dioxide and giving me back clean air. So support and loving presence is primordial, right? So often we're trying to look for love and support through other people, which is what we needed to do when we were children. But the more we can take in through our senses the immediacy of love and support as already foundational, then we have a foundation to just calm down, into out of the down into the felt sense of here now there's basic support and love. And that gives us a basis to then get curious, what's really going on for me? Why am I really reacting? What hurts? What's difficult? You know? And that gives us a basis from which to communicate without attack, meaning to listen and to ask questions and to share, this is my experience, what's yours? What's really going on between us in this moment? And sometimes we need to just take ourselves for a walk before that communication is possible. So there were many times in my 20s, in my first marriage, where, you know, like everybody, I'd get caught and stuff. And I'd take myself for a walk around the block. We lived in a cul-de-sac. And I'd be praying, you know. In that time, I was really working with A Course in Miracles. And I'd be praying, beloved Holy Spirit, here I am. I'm really caught and I'm really angry. And I'm convinced that if only he would just change and be different and do it the way I want, that I wouldn't be feeling these feelings. And I know that that's not reality. And I know that I'm very attached to my position, and I do believe that I'm right. And help me to be willing, because I'm not right now. And don't let me walk back in the door until I've calmed down a little bit and I'm capable of asking a question, you know? So, we have to find what works for us. But I find just coming down into the senses is best because it gets us out of the mind. It quiets down this little ego and gives support to come into our heart and be more honest and more interested and sincere to be, what's really going on here?
Thank you.
Now, of course, that sounds very easy, and we all know it's not.
Yes. Yes, it's like the thing, do you want to be, the Course says, do you want to be right or happy?
Yeah,
And
and our ego
honestly,
says, I want
sometimes,
both.
yes, exactly. Yeah, but I love that gentleness, of really just, being with yourself and asking yourself, what is going on here?
Yeah, but we need a basis before we can ask, you see. So you have to come out of your mind. So
Yeah,
the quickest way into presence is through the senses.
yeah.
Yeah.
That links to another question that Joan has asked. This is a really good question, I think. I understand the concept of non-duality, but unless I experience this as my truth, how do I embody it?
Yeah, well, you can't. So
So how do
firstly,
you work? How do you
yeah,
work with
well,
it
you've
then?
got to work with where you are. I mean, that's why that's so beautiful, the transmission that came. Be as you are. You can't be anywhere other than where you are. Anything else is fake. And so I'm not someone who is about trying to talk yourself into non duality. Excuse my French, it's bullshit. It doesn't work. Be where you are and be honest and sincere. And, we have to meet our direct experience with courage, compassion, and curiosity. This is the second of the modules that I'm going to be teaching over the and so we have to just bring those beautiful virtues of our deep heart to our experience, sincere in finding out what the truth is. Even if the truth is, I feel really scared. And I feel like a young child who's just really scared. Anytime we're reactive, it's not present moment. It's not a non-dual somebody. It's a young self who's reacting, right? And so we need to see that, understand that, learn how to be present with those experiences with what I call ego relaxation. Learn how to be here, feel it, do nothing, contact what's so. That's how grace finds us. That always draws us deeper into reality. And so often what we think of is the problem that blocks unity is actually the gate. It's a very interesting paradox. So as we go towards our direct experience, even if it's an egoic experience, and we learn how to be truly present with it, with openness to learn something, it will always draw us into deeper truth. Because just in the same way that a hard chunk of ice, even though it's frozen, opaque, and dense, right? Our ego's like a hard chunk of ice, frozen in fixations. The fundamental substance of that ice, what is it? It's water.
Water, yeah.
It's still water, even when it's frozen. So here's the principle. Even though you might not feel unity, because you're frozen in some construct of being a separate somebody who's identifying with the thoughts of the past, which we all do. We all do, until that starts to dissolve, right? As you learn to meet that ice, it's akin to the sun, the warmth of the sun that touches, kisses the ice, not with pressure. It doesn't hack away at it. It just touches it with warmth. What happens to the ice? It melts. And so as we learn to bring presence and unconditional awareness to where you are, even if where you are is upset and angry and hurt and lost, very common human experiences, well, the density, the kind of the stuckness, it starts to get melted. It's pretty miraculous. And this is what ego relaxation does. It melts that. And then what happens, in the same way that when the warmth of the sun touches ice, it melts, there's a transformation that takes place that's completely natural. That ice starts to return into its original substance, clear, fluid, life-giving water. And just like the ice pack and the high mountains not only melts, it actually then starts to become little streams. And then finally it becomes a waterfall. And it touches and transforms everything that living water touches. And so that's what happens. The more the density of our fixation, our hurt, our history, our stuckness, when it's contacted with an unconditional loving awareness, it starts to melt and return. So we get more access to deeper states, to who and what we really are, to what has always been, to the qualities of our true nature, to more refined states of being. Yeah. And so I'm all about the how.
And I think that's what makes it, you describe in your bio that you have a very feminine approach.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, that's what makes it a feminine approach.
That's
It's
exactly
not
right.
an intellectual, dry understanding. It's working with what's presenting in your life with kindness and compassion and
Yeah, but
gentleness.
also courage. So, yes, it's very loving, but we're uncompromising at the same time.
Yes.
But of course, I have just found that, in my earlier years of my path, I used to feel so much disappointment in, I could access all sorts of states. And, I'm fortunate that way. It's a great blessing that I've always had pretty easy access, but I couldn't live them.
Mm.
And that was very difficult and painful. I had a lot of self-judgment about that because felt like such a fall from this incredible beauty to then catch myself in the act of just, behaving egoically and getting upset about stuff that didn't really matter and, getting caught up in judgments. I had a lot of judgment about myself. And I've come to see that, you know, meeting everything with and from a consciousness of love and learning to just stay present and be unconditional is actually a lot more powerful as a methodology than trying to hack away at that ice with a hammer or an ice pick. And so the feminine approach obviously is about the primary method being compassionate and loving, but at the same time it's about embodiment. If you look at what the feminine does in nature, the feminine brings the mystical, etheric, down into the practical. And so that's what I mean when I say a feminine approach to non-dual realization. It's embodied, it's practical, it's loving, it's compassionate, but it's not uncompromising. It just happens to be more powerful, I find. Our egos
So,
are frightened. What our ego, we got to realize our ego is suffering.
yeah.
And so suffering must be met with love.
So you said that you had experiences and but you couldn't live it.
Yeah.
And so when you came back from India, you said you were in that state for 3 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
And so what was different there?
There was no
Because
chitch.
because
There was no chitch. There was no thoughts. There was no. What was really interesting, it was like, the Zen saying, before enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. After enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. It's like everything was just direct. There was no commentary. Zero. So the mind was completely quiet. Nothing was unacceptable. There was no problem with anything. Everything was just fine the way it was. So things that bothered me, I would remember in the days before, I was sitting with this incredible female saint, and, if anyone who's been to India will relate to this, in the house next door to this incredible female saint giving darshan that was extraordinary, there would just be, these really noisy kind of mindless activities happening in the house next door. And it would happen exactly at the time of the darshan. And I remember before the awakening in the cave, just sitting there in the meditation hall, just fantasizing about going next door and banging on the door and saying, look, do you mind? Many of us have traveled a very long distance, at great personal expense. We've only got 2 weeks. And could you please clean the toilets some other time? Just give it another 20 minutes. And I had to really hold myself back from acting that out, right? Well, the same thing was going on after the awakening in the cave, and it didn't bother me.
Yeah.
Things didn't bother me because there was nobody to be bothered. And that's the beautiful thing, is that when the construct of me isn't there anymore, there's no one to get upset about anything. And so everything is acceptable exactly the way it is, whether it changes or not. And so that was so beautiful, that depth of peace and acceptance of everything and everyone. And that didn't change, that stayed, that had a deep imprint, even though thoughts came back and so forth. I understood, at least conceptually in the moment, where the ordinary consciousness returned, there was something that didn't change, and that I needed now to understand what it was, what this realization was. And so, there are many other deep realizations I've had since. So people talk about non-dual realization as one thing. It's not. There are many flavors of non-dual realization, and they all bring a different kind of wisdom. So I've been on a track at least 5, I just... there's likely a lot more. I mean, I realize that it doesn't stop. The learning doesn't stop.
Someone else said, how do you deepen or expand consciousness and stay conscious while doing regular activities?
Mm-hmm. Well, that's a good question and an important one. So it takes time and practice for a state to become stabilized so that it is just our natural center point. So the first thing we need is tremendous patience and tremendous perseverance with the practices. So I think it starts with paying attention. What practices best support you to really stay present? I don't mean conceptually. I mean just to be here, relaxed, open, non-judgmental, in touch with your nature while you're cooking, while you're having a conversation with your spouse, while you're doing your emails, and to notice when you get tense. So for me, one of the greatest areas I had to work on was emails, right? I still do, get way too many emails, and often I can't keep up. Very common phenomena. We all know about it, I'm sure. And so, I would notice, my belly would get tight, my shoulders would get tight. I could feel that kind of pushing, and noticing, who's pushing? There's somebody who thinks she's the one doing the responding to the emails, and she feels pressured. And so when we catch ourselves in the act, we have a choice. So what is, when you catch yourself in the act of identifying as a separate somebody that thinks they're the one doing it, or they have to figure it out or fix it, immediately you'll notice the stress. And so we have to become aware, what are the cues for us that the I am the separate somebody doer is active? How would we know? I know what that's like for me. I know how it feels in my body. I know the kind of emotional states that arise. And so we have to first see, what is that for us? What are the red flags? What are the signs? And then we have to learn how to detach, to stop. So for me, I notice as soon as I'm starting to feel that tension and the sense of overwhelm, I stop immediately, stop what I'm doing, and just come back to sensing my feet on the ground, taking in the life-giving oxygen that is a gift from true nature, remembering, recognizing what I abide within and what the deeper truth is. So I let a reset happen, and sometimes I just come back to be nothing, do nothing, get nothing, become nothing, seek for nothing, relinquish nothing, be as you are, rest in God. Just hang out there for a minute or two. Now reset. Okay, what's needed now? So letting the doing, functioning happen from being takes a lot of that kind of practice, catching ourselves in the act, resetting, and then opening up to the task at hand but going slower and seeing, recognizing that true nature knows how to do everything. It's true nature that's been doing it all this time anyway. Just take a look out the window and observe nature. There's not an efforting going on from the trees, is there? And so that teaches us true nature is dynamic and intelligent, and it knows how to unfold and do all sorts of stuff.
Yeah.
Right? So
In
then
our
what's it
very
like
body.
if we let the force of what is respond to the email? Right? It doesn't have to happen through the filter of a separate somebody who thinks she's the doer.
Mhm.
Right? Who's just forgotten the deeper truth of things. So it's a training. One of the things that really helped me was to take very seriously that injunction that is given at the end of A Course in Miracles in the text, where it really is a section called Rules for Decision. And the summary of it really is make no decisions of yourself, which is ask and listen for everything. So I took that very seriously. Okay, what if I don't try to make any decision? The I that I think I am, all that I knows is to reference thoughts and memory. So what if I just live into the prayer, what's needed now? And what's needed now? And in relation to this situation, what's needed now? And in relation to that, what's the next step? What best serves? So then it comes to a matter of will and devotion, willingness to actually practice in those moments, and devotion to whatever the truth is, whatever best serves, regardless of what that means for me, to relax our preferences that much. This is kind of advanced stuff,
Yeah.
But this is what's helped me.
And this is what you're going to be teaching us in May.
Well, I'll be doing my darndest, I mean, this is advanced stuff. So realistically, that I I can't give everything in 4 sessions,
Yeah.
but we'll open up these subjects and I'll give some really good exercises and work with people who show up and help them as much as I can.
Yeah. So just to let people know what the sessions are going to be. The first one is called Grounding in Grace, Yielding to What Is. You've talked about that. And then in week 2, it's about transforming challenging emotions. And week 3, relaxing attachment to a separate somebody. And then week 4 is embodying grace. So for people who may be considering joining us, what would you hope that they would gain from spending these 4 weeks learning from you?
Well, I know what they'll gain is more clarity about how to work with themselves. They'll learn how to ground more substantially and learn some tools as to what really helps them with that, how to remember what they abide within and to experience that more deeply, gain more access to that. They'll learn how to work. A lot of the questions that have been coming in today have been how to work with their reactivity. Well, the second module is very much about that. How to bring the qualities of how to cultivate true compassion, courage, and curiosity so that you can work with those places of reactivity in a healing, compassionate, and powerful way. How to, actually explore and understand when you're caught in separate somebodyness and when you're referencing thoughts and memories, and I'm sure people will get a little bit more leverage in how to relax out of that without, just bypassing. I'm really not into bypassing it. Transformation happens in and through. And then, I would hope that these 4 weeks of teaching and the practices that I'll take people in will just give you a lot more precision on how to work with yourself, and that it will result in a capacity to embody the grace of your deepest nature a little bit more. What will happen for each individual will be completely unique to where they are and what their soul needs, but I can't imagine them showing up and not getting something really useful.
Yeah. And these master classes are going to be taught live on Monday at 3 p.m. Eastern, beginning May 3rd.
Yeah, I'm really glad about that because I actually really love working with people, live and being able to interact and work with their questions and concerns. So
yes, and the master classes are set up as Zoom meetings, so everyone's on screen together, so that helps that process. So we have 5 minutes left, Miranda. This time has gone so quickly. What else would you like to share? I know that you're going to end our show with another chant, but is there anything else that you would like to say in closing?
Well, yeah, I mean, just to everyone who's listening to this, the most important thing ultimately is your sincerity. We don't get to control when the gates of consciousness open and to reveal deeper aspects of our nature, but showing up sincerely for some kind of practice and being really genuine about that is what really primes the pump. And ultimately, it is your sincerity that is the dance partner of this mystery of grace. And you showing up with sincerity and sincerely engaging some kind of practice in a humble and genuine way is what's most important. So just my love and encouragement for that. And if you're not sure what your practice is, then I hope you'll get hold of the book, The Way of Grace. It's in book and audio, because there's a lot of practical practices in every chapter that if you work with, they will help you.
Yeah, it's an excellent book. And so at the moment, we have a try for $1 trial on membership of Evolve. So the link will be available in the comments on Facebook if people would like to come and join us and try what we have to offer. So Miranda, thank you so much. I'm going to be hosting your master classes, so I'm so looking forward to spending May with you and learning from you.
Yeah, thank you. I look forward to it too.
Yeah, so I'd like to just invite you to, I think you're going to do your may all beings.
Yeah. Well, ultimately, I think important is to remember that any spiritual practice that we engage, of course, it is to benefit our own peace of mind and to support a more real, fulfilling, meaningful existence. But it's also a gift to everyone else, and that's really the point, is for our practice to just liberate more human goodness and to liberate more truth and love and benefit, because it's for everybody. It's a little bit like when we do our part. It's a contribution to the psychic global cleanup of the pollution of ego. So just whatever you've received from this hour together that's been meaningful and helpful to you, just let yourself breathe into your heart and feel the impact, the blessing that you've received from this. And in your own way, just offer that blessing to everyone. As we pray the metta prayer, may all beings dwell in the heart. May all beings be free from suffering. May all beings be healed. May all beings know their wholeness. May all beings be happy and at peace. May all beings dwell in the heart. May all beings be free from suffering. May all beings be healed. May all beings
Thank you, Miranda. And thank you, everyone, for being with us for this hour. And I hope to welcome you to the presenter series in Evolve with Miranda beginning the 3rd of May. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.